Welcome back to the Politics and Media Show. And for the second half of the show, we're discussing Muslim women in the workplace. Are Muslims, and Muslim women in particular, discriminated against at work? Some Muslim women are saying that their prospects at work improve if they remove their hijabs. Some say this is a form of discrimination, others that Muslims should be more tolerant of the perceived values of the wider society. Here with me in the studio are Rahana Patel, who's written on this issue for The Independent, and Catherine Heseltine from the Muslim Public Affairs Committee UK. Welcome to the programme, both of you. Rahana, so what do you think is actually happening to Muslim women in the workplace? What is the form of this discrimination?
I mean, the discrimination's happening. I mean, we saw that the all-parliamentary group report, they released the report, and it showed that Muslim women, and in particular ethnic minority women, are being discriminated right from the recruitment stage, right in the workplace. And, you know, from my personal experiences, I can actually relate to discrimination in the workplace. Can a Muslim woman work without compromising their religious beliefs? You can. And this is from my experiences in the private sector environment. And, you know, I have lots of Muslim friends and colleagues who are experiencing the same thing. So it's a reality, it's happening, and I think it needs to be addressed.
And a sort of anecdotal level, what kind of things are happening to women? Is it a question that the interview process is harder for them, that they find that there's less take-up when they apply? What's happening in the workplace if they do get a job? It's
in the workplace. I think it's accommodation of religious beliefs, really. I don't think employers are understanding of it. Specifically in private sector institutions, the religion is a taboo subject. It's not discussed. No one asks you about your religion. You've got this whole pub culture, alcohol thing. You know, it's something that's not discussed. It's not accommodated for. And you know, in my last job, you know, I made it very clear on my CV that I was Muslim, you know, I don't drink, and yet, you know, my welcome to the team was an outing to the pub for a drink, and I was like, well, you know, I don't want to go, but I felt like I had to go because, you know, it was sort of, everyone was expecting me to go. And then after that, you know, I made it really clear that I wasn't into alcohol, I wasn't going to the pub, and then, you know, everyone else just kept asking me to the pub. So I think the issue of alcohol, that's the main thing that in private sector institutions. But it's also like little things like prayer room, so forth. I know as a graduate, you're coming into a workplace for the first time. You're not going to want to ask for a prayer room, especially if it's a small office and there's only like 2 meeting rooms. And then, you know, my manager knew that I was going out on my lunch breaks to do my prayers into the local library, or there was a prayer room that was 15 minutes away. Yet there was no indication saying, oh, well, you can use one of the meeting rooms, you can use that. And, you know, as I was trying to prove myself within the organisation, I didn't really want to ask.
Do you accept this is widespread, Catherine?
I think, yeah, Muslims and particularly Muslim women do face discrimination, but I think what we've got to do is say as a community, is that something we're going to sit back and just moan about and go, oh, well, it's not fair, is it? Or is it something we're going to proactively tackle as a community rather than leaving it to individual Muslim women to go and, you know, fight their corner in the workplace? So I think, you know, Islamophobia is a big root of that problem, and even research by the Department of Work and Pensions showed that if you have a name that, for example, sounds Muslim, you have to send off twice as many applications to get an interview on average as if your name sounds like a, you know, average white non-Muslim Joe Bloggs. But you know, that means that you know, if we need to tackle Islamophobia through having effective political lobbying, effective media monitoring as a community, and public relations work as a community, these are things that we're not organised to do. You know, we're not funding. It seems if you want to raise money for a new chandelier in the mosque, then that's easy. If you want to lobby against this kind of Islamophobia being stoked, that's a very difficult thing to organise the Muslim community to do. So I think if we change the mindset, we can tackle that. And we have got to remember, we've got a good start. As British Muslims, I myself am a primary school teacher. I've worked in state schools my whole career. If I was in France, just across the channel, I couldn't wear my hijab and do my job. And again, thankfully, you know, maybe that public sector environment, I've always found quite friendly to myself as a Muslim. You know, I've always been able to pray and work, and I've worked in a lot of different schools. And sometimes, you know, there's not much space. You have to find, you know, even a stock cupboard or whatever, and people are apologetic. But people, my last school, you know, there was some little meeting rooms that we had notices up. You could just blue tack to the door when you were saying your prayers, use it for 5 minutes, and come out. So. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rohanda, first of all, I mean, I guess there's 2 points there that are worth perhaps pursuing a little bit. Firstly, do you think that the sort of starting point in this country is perhaps further forward than it is in some European countries? And secondly, do you think this is essentially a structural? I mean, I take Catherine's point to be that this is a structural question that needs political campaigning to change across the board.
I mean, I don't really think so. I mean, I think public sector institutions and faith-based organisations are probably more accommodating and understanding of religious beliefs. You know, and I work in a faith-based institution now, and I find that more, I can practice my religion more. Whereas I think private sector is the issue of religion itself. It's not necessarily being Muslim. I mean, I'm speaking because as a Muslim woman, those were my experiences, but I think the whole concept of religion is taboo in private sector institutions. No one wants to discuss it. You know, it's just off the topic, and that needs to be addressed. I think employers need to engage more with their employees, find out more about their religious beliefs, and be more accommodating. I mean, we saw that that lady from British Airways who had to move. I think she got demoted, I think, or transferred to another department because she was wearing a cross on her neck. You know, why can't she wear a cross on the neck? The same issue. Why can't a Muslim woman wear a hijab? It's the issue of religion, and I think that's the problem.
So not saying a structural question. I mean,
on the thing of hijab, we do legally have the right that unless there's some how they can show that it affects your ability to do your job, that you legally have the right to wear hijab, not be discriminated against. But the community, how many organisations are there that I could go to if I felt I was being discriminated against and say, you know, support me, either if there's an employment tribunal to get free legal advice on these kind of things, or even just to spread that kind of knowledge through, you know, through our mosques, through our community organisations. You know, when would imams ever talk about, you know, supporting sisters who want to wear hijab and also contribute to society in work, to educate them that they've got that right. So I do think it does need, you know, that support, rather than, you know, I have heard of cases of sisters who have stopped wearing hijab because they felt like their careers were getting held back. I think we've got to collectively say, well, sisters need a bit more support.
No, I agree with that, but I don't think it's not open discrimination. Like, no one's going to say take off your hijab, or I'm not going to hire you because you're not wearing it, because you're wearing a hijab. I think it's a discrimination within internally, and you probably wouldn't know about that, so you can't really take that anywhere.
Yeah, there'll be certain cases you could you know, you could take legally, and certain where it is difficult to prove. But for example, maybe if you know, one avenue that I'd advocate is Muslims need to be more actively involved in trade unions and professional bodies, and working through those kind of structures to advocate to employers how can they be more you know, friendly to diversity, including Muslim employees, and making a business case that actually, as you said in your article, Muslim women are a big untapped, you know, economic resource for this country. So we can advocate that to employers directly, to professional bodies, and also to politicians, that the politicians could take a lot more leadership on this if we put that pressure and held them accountable.
Do you think this is the thing that starts at sight? You know, if in an interview process a woman in a hijab walks through the door, do you think that process has already kicked in at that point?
Yes, I think so. I mean, in terms of, yes, in a way. I mean, I obviously don't wear the hijab, so I really can't comment on that. But from my CV, I think anyone can tell that I'm Muslim. I've been involved in a lot of, you know, Islamic faith-based activities. And I didn't think I was discriminated against in getting a job. I think my problem was actually in the workplace itself, being able to practice my religion in terms of, you know, prayer times and social outings and conversations that people would have in the office, and the lack of respect for religious beliefs.
Do you think that this is something that you might put in a broader context? Because I don't think it's perhaps not only Muslims or only Muslim women, certainly, who don't like the pub culture in some workplaces. Certainly,
and you know, if promotions are basically being sorted out over a beer down the pub. Well, it's not only Muslim women, but what about all those women who have to get leave work at the end of office hours and go and pick their children up from childcare? What about people of other faiths that don't share that culture? So it is something that is, and we have to work with other minority groups, with those who are fighting for women's rights generally in employment, and promote that. But I think we can't be defeatist about it. If there was pressure from government, if there was pressure from the media, why is this something that's not being explored more on mainstream media channels? If this was a big issue, bit of a scandal that this was happening, there'd be more pressure on employers, I think, to sort it out.
Do you think what do you think could happen in workplaces to change that culture?
I think there has to be more engagement. I think employers need to be more engaging with their employees and find out more about them. I mean, there might be an instance where there's, everyone in the organization wants to go down to the pub, and that's fine. But then there might be a Muslim woman or another lady who doesn't want to go down. People with kids. So I think it's about getting to know your employers, engaging with them, and then implementing activities that you can include everyone in the organization, not just I think I want to go down to the pub, and I think everyone else wants to do that. And I think the issue is from what I've experienced, is my employer used to treat everyone to the pub. So it would be like a Friday evening, I'll buy everyone drinks, let's go down to the pub. But if there's other people that don't want to go, how about going for coffee instead, or just some other form of activity that can include everyone?
So how do you think that would work? Do you think there should be the employees should drive this process of change, or do you think that
I think individual employees need support. So for instance, Rohan was saying a new graduate going on may not have the confidence to go and ask for a prayer space without feeling that they'd be looked at differently. But say if there was an association of professionals, Muslim professionals within that career that you're in, who had already raised that with the management to say, well, actually, Muslim employees may need somewhere to pray, and they'd actually proactively offered you that space, that would be very different. So I think we can't put the pressure on individuals. We have to be organised as a community.
Yeah, let's look at the other end of the spectrum, because we've been discussing the kind of microcosm of relationships within an individual workplace and how that might work. And all right, that might be reproduced across many workplaces. But I mean, you used the term Islamophobia earlier. Let's face it. No matter how much sort of work goes on at the microcosm, if in some other part of the society this stuff is being churned out by the politicians and churned out by the press, that has to be dealt with, because otherwise it is simply going to drip into the workplace or flood into the workplace or whatever.
Absolutely. When you have this drip of negative stories in the media about Muslims, then when your Muslim employee walks in the door, then of course that's going to cloud the people who've read that and who know what they know about Muslims is principally through the media. But again, we can tackle that as a community if we were much more proactive about monitoring the media. Small organisations like Muslim Public Affairs Committee, with a small number of volunteers, have run media campaigns that have led to corrections in mainstream media, from the BBC to newspapers. When Robert Kilroy Silk was writing articles saying that we were limb amputators and women oppressors, he ended up losing his job at the BBC because of a campaign that got in over 1,000 complaints. So Muslims can make a difference on that, but we need to be proactively organised. We need to fund professional bodies that will do that. Mosques need to educate people about what they can do about Islamophobia through media, through politics. Again, this is a group of MPs that have published this report, but they've been their committee has been funded by non-Muslim anti-discriminatory groups and supported through groups like the Runnymede Trust. Well, actually, I'd like to see a lot more Muslim organisations active in engaging with MPs on issues like this. And again, we can go back to a grassroots level when it comes to the mosques and supporting kids right the way through, mentoring them, providing that extra tuition and careers fairs, and that's the kind of thing that will give people confidence.
Do you see that is part of a sort of a bigger picture of Islamophobia?
Sort of. I mean, I think when Catherine's saying starting from the grassroots level, I think, yes, that can be effective, but I think it needs to come from a senior level also. I mean, if you've got a grassroots level doing the work, it's not really going to make much of a difference unless you've got like MPs or senior members actually pushing employers to implement some of these policies into their workplaces.
And that will only happen if we lobby them and demand, as voters, what is our MP done to make it easier for Muslim women to get on in the workplace? That should be something that we expect from our MPs. But again, as Muslims, are we politically savvy? How many Muslim organisations are involved in monitoring that kind of work? And when we've as MPAC gone door to door at election time and said, well, actually, this is what your MP has said about Muslims, often quite Islamophobic things. There's often a huge lack of knowledge in the community. And
do you think there might become a point? I mean, this is always said of or said to people who are campaigning for change, that if you push, if the institutions give way, it kind of produces a backlash that people say, oh well, look, people aren't willing to integrate. I mean, you can hear the political right generating this argument now. Do you think there's any purchase for that argument or not?
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously you're talking about grassroots level and Muslim women, Muslim organisations pushing for their MPs to do, to have more accommodation for Muslim women. I think that will create a really political backlash, especially from right-wing supporters. I mean, the article that I wrote on The Independent, I had really nasty comments at the bottom saying, Muslims want this, they're demanding this. And I think if we challenge the religion issue as a whole, I think that might be more effective, as in saying that let's open up discussion on religion in the workplace. Let's start being more accommodating, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jew, or Jewish, or Sikh even, yeah.
So do you think that's a possible way of dealing with a potential backlash, that you have a kind of sort of pan-religious?
It definitely has to be in partnership with other faith groups, other minority groups. I think that is really important. And I think we also do have to be careful that we are reasonable in what we expect from employers. I think actually cases like a few years ago, the Muslim classroom assistant who wanted to wear a face veil when working with primary school children actually set back the cause of Muslim rights in employment a lot, because to me, I work in primary schools. I know that it's important that young kids can see your full face, your smile, engage on that level. And so for me, if I wanted to wear a face veil, I don't think that I should wear it with primary school kids.
I mean, this is an interesting debate because, I mean, this has always been said, and for instance, in the American Civil Rights Movement, I mean, there became two wings, one of which would say, OK, we need to make a reasoned response, we need to take account of the possibilities of backlash, and et cetera, et cetera. But there were others, Malcolm X amongst them, who said, well, basically, we push as far forward as fast as we can, damn the backlash, and we'll see what the progress is. That you don't think that's a possible response?
I think in this day and age, we've got Islamophobia, as Catherine said, it's prevalent. I think if we're going to do that, it won't work. I think it's going to cause more issues for Muslim women than there are more good.
Yeah, we have to be about being effective. I don't think it's going to do anyone any good, but we've got to tackle this Islamophobia, the fact that there would be a backlash. We've got to tackle organisations like the EDL that are part of this right wing that is growing against Muslims. So I think it's all about that general mindset that we have as a community, that yes, there is a big problem, but are we passive victims, or are we going to take the power that we have through our votes, through politics, through media activism, and through getting our mosques active as supporting our communities, improve things, because other minority groups have shown that it's possible to improve their situation and tackle discrimination.
Who are you thinking of as a model there in your mind when you say that other people have done it?
Well, I mean, the Black civil rights movement in America has made huge leaps and bounds, and people wouldn't have thought that you could have Barack Obama as president of the United States, not so long ago. And again, I think there are, other communities that are, more organised in supporting their rights. I've, heard about some within the Hindu community and within the sort of temple organisations and stuff, having career mentoring events to support younger members of the community that were going through there. And I think young Muslims deserve that same kind of support.
Rohan, do you think this is a kind of broad cultural issue, that the culture just hasn't adapted? Or do you think, as we might say about the whites in the southern states of America in the 60s and before, that there's a deliberate racist intent here? How would you gauge the kind of depth of the problem between it being an unaddressed cultural question and it being a deliberate?
I don't think it's a deliberate race intent thing. I think it's just a lack of understanding and probably ignorance on the part of people, really. It's just about opening up the discussion, letting people know some of the issues that we have, maybe start from the grassroots and bring it up to a senior level, and pushing for change, really.
Although you were mentioning the EDL, I mean, there's clearly an intent there, and perhaps we might say with some far-right mainstream politicians, certainly in Europe, this is not simply a sort of unaddressed form of ignorance. It's a deliberate political intervention of a racist nature, isn't it?
Absolutely, where Muslims are becoming a political football that they can be kicked around, and we've seen with some of the laws that are being introduced discriminating against Muslims in Europe, with the laws against the veil and the laws against hijab in French schools. That's something that's done to get that populist move. But we have votes, we have voices, we can write. I think that the kind of journalism that you're involved with, and nowadays with the internet, everyone can be a journalist. Everyone can have their say. We can get involved in these debates beyond Islam Channel and out into the mainstream and win people over, from everything from having mosque open days, so that the first time that someone meets a Muslim, is at their local mosque when they get invited down for a cup of tea and cultural event, have some food, and talk about these issues, rather than who's this strange person sitting in strange clothes, in my interview.
How important do you think it is that this is actually addressed within the workplace? I mean, let me put it like this. Quite a lot of people accept that the process of work discipline in the workplace excludes lots of things that they would like to be able to do and would make them feel more comfortable inside the workplace, and that part of work is that you're told what to do, when to do, how to do it. Do you think that this is part of a sort of a broader stance for people being able to insist that their working lives should be more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that should happen. I think if you feel more comfortable, you're more productive and you're more happier with the environment, and you can actually engage with your employers more. For me, I wasn't happy. I wasn't respected. There was occasional times when they'd bring alcohol into the office, and I just I didn't really. It wasn't something I felt comfortable with, and that was what prompted me to want to leave and look for work in an Islamic faith-based institution. But yeah, it has to come from inside the organisation. I think if the employees can push it, but I think there's got to be some engagement, not necessarily towards Muslims. I think to religion as a whole.
And how do you see this as part? Do you think that is part of a or could be part of a wider push by employees to be treated in all respects in a more dignified way inside the workplace?
Absolutely. I think it should be seen hand in hand with push for family-friendly, flexible working, and general respect, as you put it, for employees as individuals and not just kind of economic units.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that's the point where we're going to have to leave the discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join us for future episodes of the Politics and Media programme.